Orcas are among the most breathtaking creatures on Earth, making them a star attraction at major ocean parks. But behind the dazzling performances lies a harsh reality. These intelligent animals are often mistreated and exploited for entertainment. What many forget is that orcas aren't just beautiful, they're also powerful and unpredictable. Today, we're diving into shocking stories where trainers face the ultimate consequence: deadly encounters with the very orcas they trained. While parks have tried to keep some of these incidents hidden, we're here to reveal them all. On May 16, 2012, Blue Horizon Marine Park in San Diego was buzzing with excitement for its summer season opener. Known for its intimate shows and innovative training techniques, Blue Horizon offered visitors a closer look at marine life than larger parks like SeaWorld. The park's star was Aurora, a 16-year-old female orca captured off the coast of Russia in 2001. At 19 feet long and weighing 8,000 pounds, Aurora was smaller than most performing orcas. But what she lacked in size, she made up for with intelligence and exciting, unpredictable behavior. Blue Horizon had been a staple of San Diego's tourist scene for decades. Founded in the early 1980s as a small marine education center, it grew steadily, expanding its facilities and adding performances to attract larger crowds. Unlike larger parks, Blue Horizon marketed itself as a more personal experience, focusing on trainer-animal interactions and emphasizing conservation and education. It quickly became a favorite among families, offering up-close encounters with dolphins, sea lions, and of course Aurora, the park's most popular attraction. By the 2000s, Blue Horizon had built a loyal following, known for pushing the boundaries of marine mammal performance while maintaining a family-first atmosphere. The Orca tank at Blue Horizon held 1.5 million gallons of water and had an observation platform that allowed audiences a full view of the pool's 40-foot depth. However, the park's smaller size and fewer resources meant it sometimes operated on thinner margins. Management often walked a fine line between innovation and risk, striving to remain competitive in an increasingly crowded market. That pressure to stand out would set the stage for what was about to unfold. In the spotlight that day was Sophia Chen, a 22-year-old trainer with a deep passion for marine life. Raised in Huntington Beach, California, Sophia had been fascinated by the ocean for as long as anyone could remember. As a child, she spent hours at the tide pools, carefully observing starfish and anemones, dreaming of the day she could work with marine animals. Her father, a marine biologist, was her greatest inspiration, taking her on early morning boat trips to tag dolphins and study migrating whales. Those shared experiences sparked something in Sophia, a lifelong desire to bridge the gap between humans and the creatures of the sea. But her path wasn't without its challenges. Her father passed away unexpectedly when she was 16, leaving a void that only deepened her connection to the ocean. It became her sanctuary, a place where she felt closest to him. Determined to honor his memory, Sophia threw herself into her studies, eventually earning a degree in marine biology and interning at Blue Horizon, where her talent quickly became evident. By 22, Sophia had become one of the youngest senior trainers at Blue Horizon. Known for her patience and calm demeanor, she had a gift for working with the park's more difficult animals, none more so than Aurora. Trainers often struggled to maintain the orca's attention, but Sophia could engage her for hours, earning the trust of the 8,000-pound predator in a way few others had. Colleagues often said that Sophia had a natural connection with the orca, one that seemed almost unspoken. Aurora, in many ways, became a symbol of Sophia's resilience, an unpredictable, wild force that she worked tirelessly to understand and bond with. The park's management capitalized on this relationship, pushing her into high-profile performances and marketing campaigns. To the public, Sophia was the park's rising star, someone with a bright future who seemed born to be in the water, riding the waves alongside the ocean's most powerful creatures. But behind the scenes, tensions were growing. trainers with years of experience had begun noticing changes in Aurora's behavior. Jessica Martinez, the head trainer, observed subtle but concerning signs: refusing food, vocalizing in unfamiliar patterns, and ignoring established cues during rehearsals. These behaviors, while not overtly aggressive, were clear indicators of stress and unease, setting off alarms among senior staff. Just weeks earlier, during a rehearsal, Aurora had refused to perform the breach maneuver and exhibited signs of agitation. Jessica raised her concerns about the new high-risk routine planned for the afternoon show, a maneuver that required Sophia to ride on Aurora's back for a full circle around the tank, ending in a synchronized breach. She recommended postponing the performance until Aurora could be fully evaluated. Management, however, had other ideas. Sophia was a rising star, and the unique bond between her and Aurora had become a centerpiece of the park's marketing strategy. The morning show's flawless execution only strengthened their resolve to push forward. With a packed stadium and the promise of a spectacular performance, the show would go on. At 2:30 p.m., the stadium was packed with over 3,000 spectators. Sophia smiled and waved to the crowd before stepping onto the platform. The routine began as planned. Aurora performed her initial behaviors, spy hops, tail slaps, and vocalizations with precision, delighting the audience. But Jessica noticed the orca's movements were becoming rigid, her turn sharper than usual. Sophia, focused on the crowd's excitement, missed these subtle signs. As she slid into the water, the audience fell silent in anticipation of the grand finale. Sophia positioned herself near Aurora's dorsal fin, preparing for the synchronized breach. Without warning, Aurora twisted violently, clamping down on Sophia's torso. The crowd's cheers turned to horrified screams as the orca dragged Sophia to the bottom of the 40-foot tank. The water, crystal clear, left nothing to the imagination. Spectators watched in shock as Aurora pinned Sophia against the bottom of the pool. Trainers on the platform slapped the water with poles and deployed the emergency net, but Aurora ignored them. The orca held Sophia underwater for nearly 2 minutes, surfacing briefly before diving again. Each time Sophia resurfaced, her movements grew weaker. Aurora's grip remained unrelenting as she thrashed Sophia through the water. Her powerful tail churned up waves that crashed against the tank's edges, sending sprays of water over the stunned onlookers. Sophia managed to break free for a fleeting moment, gasping for air, but Aurora lunged again, pulling her under. The trainer's shouts grew more frantic as they tried to distract the orca with food buckets, a last-ditch effort that had worked in emergencies before. But Aurora refused to respond. The struggle continued for over 3 minutes, the orca's raw strength overwhelming any attempt to save the young trainer. Blood began to cloud the water, a dark and chilling contrast against the bright blue of the tank. When rescue divers finally reached her, they pulled her lifeless body from the water. Emergency responders performed CPR as she was rushed to UC San Diego Medical Center, but it was too late. Sophia was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The autopsy revealed catastrophic injuries: multiple broken ribs, a punctured lung, and a severed spinal cord. Drowning was listed as the official cause of death. The aftermath was swift and unforgiving. Blue Horizon faced intense scrutiny for ignoring warning signs and failing to implement proper safety protocols. Internal documents revealed that senior trainers had raised concerns about Aurora's increasing stress, only to be overruled by management. The park was fined heavily and, within a year, permanently shut down its orca program. Aurora was retired from performances and relocated to a facility focused on research and rehabilitation. The incident led to increased caution when working with orcas in captivity, though it didn't result in a complete ban. Among trainers, awareness of the risks was heightened. But as our next story reveals, having multiple trainers on site is not enough. Without proper training, even though you may be cautious, a single mistake can lead to a fatal outcome and the tragic death of an orca trainer. was a crisp, breezy morning on July 6, 1991 in San Diego, California. The SeaWorld Park, normally bustling with families and eager tourists, seemed quieter than usual as the sounds of excited chatter and laughter filled the air. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the crowd, while the occasional call of a distant seagull added to the peaceful ambiance. Visitors milled about, absorbing the sights and sounds of the ocean, unaware that the performance they were about to witness would shatter the tranquil mood and lead to a tragic event that would leave a permanent scar on the park's legacy. Jonathan Smith, a 20-year-old marine animal trainer, stood backstage near the massive Orca tank. He had always dreamed of working with marine animals, and at such a young age, his dream had come true. Jonathan had recently been hired at SeaWorld, and this performance would be his first time working with Can-Do, one of the park's most famous orcas. He had heard the whispers from the other trainers about Can-Do's unpredictable behavior, but they reassured him that it was just part of the nature of working with such powerful creatures. But Jonathan couldn't shake the feeling that something was different today. He was about to face Can-Do in the water, but he hadn't fully realized the risk he was about to take. Can-Do, a 19-foot orca, was one of SeaWorld's prized animals. Born in the wild off the coast of Iceland in 1977, she was captured at the age of 3 and brought to the park. Her size and strength made her a staple of the shows at SeaWorld, where she had dazzled audiences with her agility and beauty. But beneath her mesmerizing exterior, Can-Do harbored signs of distress. The years spent in captivity had begun to take a toll on her behavior. Over time, her interactions with the trainers became more unpredictable. Moments of aggression and erratic movements were becoming more frequent, especially when it was time for her to perform. Her behavior had become a known risk, though the park continued to push her into performances, as she was one of their top attractions. Jonathan had trained with orcas before, but never one as large and potentially dangerous as Can-Do. Despite his nerves, he trusted the safety protocols and the guidance of his senior trainers, who assured him everything would go smoothly. As the show began, everything seemed normal. Can-Do performed her tricks with her usual grace, thrilling the audience as she breached the surface of the tank, sending water cascading through the air. Jonathan, standing at the edge of the tank, gave her the signals, and Can-Do obeyed with the precision she had become known for. The crowd cheered as the routine went on, but as the performance neared its end and it was time for Jonathan to enter the water with Can-Do for the final act, something began to shift. Can-Do's movements became less fluid, more erratic. Her tail slapped against the water with an intensity that sent ripples across the tank. When Jonathan entered the water beside Can-Do, the orca circled him in an unsettling way, her eyes no longer meeting his, but darting around as if searching for something. Jonathan signaled for the breach the moment when Can-Do would rise above him, but instead she swam past him, ignoring his cues. Can-Do swam in tight circles, her body tense and her movements jarring. He repeated the signal more firmly this time, but Can-Do didn't respond. Suddenly, Can-Do swam directly at Jonathan. The audience gasped as Can-Do's massive body slammed into him, knocking him off his feet. Her teeth sank into his arm with terrifying force, dragging him beneath the surface. The water around them churned violently as Can-Do thrashed Jonathan, her powerful jaws clamping down on his body. Jonathan's attempts to break free were futile against the strength of the orca. He was trapped, unable to escape the grip of the animal that moments before had been his partner in the show. The crowd watched in frozen horror, their gasps turning to screams as they realized this was no longer part of the act. For several minutes, Jonathan was pulled and slammed against the tank walls. Can-Do's grip did not relent, and another orca, Keanu, joined the attack, further complicating the desperate scene. The show's other trainers screamed for help, tossing buoy rings and anything they could find into the water. But Can-Do seemed oblivious to their efforts, focused solely on the young trainer she had trapped. Blood began to cloud the water, and it became clear that the situation was dire. When Can-Do finally released Jonathan, his limp body floated to the surface unconscious. The scene was chaotic. Divers plunged into the tank, pulling Jonathan to safety, but the damage had been done. Paramedics rushed to the scene, performing CPR as Jonathan was quickly transported to a nearby hospital. Jonathan survived the incident but suffered serious injuries, including bruised ribs, internal organ damage, and a laceration to his liver caused by Candu's jaws. He was hospitalized for 9 days following the attack. In the aftermath of the attack, Jonathan filed a lawsuit against SeaWorld, alleging negligence and seeking damages for the harm caused by Candu and the other orca involved. The lawsuit highlighted the park's failure to address the growing signs of aggression in the orcas and the risks associated with their captivity. Jonathan claimed that despite the known risks, SeaWorld had allowed him to participate in a performance with Candu without proper safeguards or training for handling such aggressive behavior. The lawsuit was settled out of court, but the incident brought significant attention to the safety of trainers and the ethics of orca captivity, fueling ongoing debates about the treatment of marine mammals in entertainment. Candu, once a symbol of SeaWorld's success, was temporarily removed from the performance schedule, though the emotional and physical scars from the attack would remain. SeaWorld continued to face scrutiny, and the tragic incident with Jonathan Smith became a painful reminder of the risks inherent in captivity. However, Jonathan Smith's harrowing incident was not the only one of its kind at SeaWorld. John Sillick, another experienced trainer, would soon face the same aggression from orcas that had gone unchecked for years. Despite the mounting incidents, SeaWorld continued to ignore the growing signs of danger. What followed would have horrific consequences, exposing just how dangerously close the park came to repeating its past mistakes. It was a serene afternoon on July 11, 2006 in Monterey, California. The sun hung lazily in the sky, casting long, golden rays over the Pacific Ocean. Seaside Marine Park, a beloved local attraction, buzzed with life as visitors strolled past exhibits, taking in the beauty of the coastal setting. The sound of waves crashing gently against the shore blended with the laughter of children and the distant calls of seagulls. The bright, warm atmosphere belied the tension that quietly simmered beneath the surface, especially for those who worked behind the scenes. Seaside Marine Park, nestled along the stunning coast of Monterey, California, had been a popular attraction since its opening in 1987. Initially focused on rehabilitating injured marine life, the park expanded in the late 1990s to feature high-energy shows with dolphins, sea lions, and eventually its prized orca Nero. Captured off the coast of Iceland in 1995, Nero was separated from his pod at just 3 years old, an experience that left a mark on the young orca. Despite his early trauma, Nero quickly became the park's star. Seaside Marine Park averaged 8,000 visitors weekly, with the orca shows accounting for nearly 60% of ticket sales. By 2006, Nero was performing 5 shows per week, each featuring choreographed routines that emphasized his size and agility. His powerful size, 19 feet long and weighing 9,000 pounds, and his high-energy performances made him a crowd favorite. However, beneath his majestic exterior, Nero's behavior began to show signs of distress. Lila Weston, 25, had always been captivated by the ocean. Growing up in San Francisco, she spent countless hours watching documentaries about marine life, her curiosity about the creatures beneath the surface shaping her childhood. Her fascination with orcas was sparked at age 7 during a family trip to Seaside Marine Park, where she first saw Nero perform. From that moment, she was determined to work with marine mammals. Her older sister Emma had already set the path, working as a senior trainer at Seaside Marine Park when Lila was still in high school. Inspired by Emma's dedication, Lila pursued a degree in marine biology and joined the park as a trainer in 2005. The two sisters formed a close-knit team, working side by side, with Lila quickly becoming one of Nero's primary trainers. Compassionate, driven, and deeply empathetic, Lila was respected by her colleagues for her ability to balance professionalism with genuine care for the animals she worked with. Outside the park, Lila spent her weekends volunteering at wildlife rescue centers and hiking along the California coast, always feeling connected to nature. By early 2006, however, Lila began noticing subtle changes in Nero's behavior. The once majestic orca, whose high-energy performances had always captivated the crowd, started showing signs of stress. Nero began slamming his tail against the tank walls, refusing to eat and ignoring commands. Lila documented these changes carefully, concerned that the constant demands of his performance schedule were taking a toll on him. Despite her repeated warnings to park management, they dismissed her concerns, claiming Nero's behavior was within the normal limits for a captive orca. She confided in Emma just days before the incident, telling her she feared for both Nero's welfare and the safety of the trainers. Emma encouraged her to keep pushing for change, but both sisters felt powerless against the park's priorities. Eventually, the park would acknowledge the danger, but far too late and in the worst way possible. As the audience settled into their seats on June 11th for the park's most popular show, the Orca performance, Lila stood at the edge of the tank. Emma stood by her side watching intently. The sisters shared quiet worries amongst themselves about Nero's increasingly concerning change in behavior. The performance began like any other. Nero executed his opening tricks with the usual energy, performing a series of breaches and tail slaps, thrilling the audience. Lila guided him through each movement with the precision of years of training. The crowd cheered, and Nero seemed to respond well, just as he had done so many times before. But as the show continued, Nero's behavior was becoming less predictable. He was slower to respond to commands and seemed to be distracted by something beneath the surface of the water. Yet the performance went on and no one in the crowd seemed to notice. The final act of the show was always the high-flying breach, a move that had become a signature of Lila and Nero's performances. Lila would enter the water alongside Nero, swimming with him for a few moments before signaling for the grand finale. Nero would breach the water, soaring through the air and diving back down, just missing Lila's body as he arced above her. It was a thrilling display of trust and synchronization, one that had captivated audiences for years. But today, as Lila slid into the water beside him, she felt a creeping unease that she couldn't shake. Nero swam with her as he always had, but there was something off about his movements. They were jerky, less fluid, and his usual grace was replaced by a subtle tension in his body. Lila signaled for him to begin the breach, but Nero didn't follow the command. Instead, he swam around her in tight circles, his eyes wide and unfocused, as if distracted. Lila raised her hand again more forcefully this time, but Nero didn't seem to acknowledge her. His movements became more frantic, his body tightening with every stroke. Nero failed to follow the cues, his movements growing more erratic, drifting further from the routine they had perfected. Then Nero attacked. The roar of the crowd went silent in an instant. A gasp filled the air as Nero's massive body shot toward Lila, his jaws closing around her leg with terrifying speed. The water churned violently as Nero dragged Lila under, his strength overwhelming. Lila screamed, but her voice was swallowed by the roar of the tank. For a moment, the audience was frozen in confusion, unsure if this was part of the act. But when they saw the frantic flailing of Lila's body and the blood rising to the surface, the reality of the situation became tragically clear. Trainers on the platform rushed to act, tossing life rings and shouting commands in a desperate attempt to redirect Nero's attention. But the Orca remained unresponsive, his focus solely on Lila. Nero continued to thrash violently, slamming Lila's body against the walls of the tank, each impact more brutal than the last. The crowd screamed in horror as the unthinkable unfolded before them. Lila fought against the Orca's grip, but she was no match for his raw power. For nearly 3 minutes, Nero held onto her, the struggle becoming more desperate with each passing second. Finally, with a forceful jerk, Nero released Lila. Her unconscious body floated to the surface of the tank, limp and lifeless. The trainers dove into the water, pulling her from the tank as paramedics rushed to the scene. Lila was quickly rushed to Monterey Community Hospital, but the damage was severe. Despite the efforts of the medical team, Lila was pronounced dead at 3:42 p.m., just over an hour after the attack. In the aftermath, evidence surfaced showing Nero's behavior had been escalating for months and that Lila had repeatedly voiced her concerns. Despite this, the park had failed to take action. Seaside Marine Park never recovered. Attendance dwindled and sponsors withdrew their support. By mid-2007, the park announced its closure. Nero, the orca who had been at the center of the tragedy, was relocated to a marine sanctuary off the coast of British Columbia, where he could live in a more natural environment. Lila's experience with captive orcas was not an isolated incident. In our next story, we turn to one of the most infamous names in marine parks, SeaWorld. Known worldwide yet steeped in controversy, it sets the stage for another heartbreaking tale. This time, we reveal the story of Jonathan Smith, a man whose encounter with a captive orca exposed the desperate longing of these majestic creatures to return to the wild. On the morning of August 4th, 2014, Ocean View Marine World in Tampa, Florida was already buzzing with activity. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park's signature blue tanks. Maintenance crews worked quietly around the grounds as trainers prepped for another busy day. The air was heavy with the scent of salt water, and the rhythmic splash of waves in the pools set a calm but deceptive tone. It was a typical summer day, or at least it seemed that way. At 10 a.m., senior trainer David Mitchell prepared for a routine relationship session with Thor, the park's largest orca. At 31, David had spent 8 years working with marine mammals, rising through the ranks to become one of Ocean View's most trusted trainers. Known for his calm, methodical approach and his unwavering focus on safety, David had earned the respect of his peers and the animals he trained. Thor, a 21-foot, 9,000-pound male orca, was the park's main attraction. Captured near Iceland in 1992, he had been at Ocean View for decades. Although impressive and generally reliable, Thor had a history that made him unpredictable. He had been involved in 2 previous incidents, both the result of trainers breaching safety protocols. Thor's first recorded incident occurred in 2006 when a trainer was pulled into the water, resulting in a 3-month suspension of in-water interactions. The second incident occurred in 2012 when Thor refused to release a training object and aggressively rammed the tank wall during a high-energy session. No trainers were injured, but the event led to temporary changes in Thor's exercise routines. In response, the park implemented stricter rules, requiring at least 3 experienced trainers for every orca session and mandatory emergency drills to prepare for worst-case scenarios. That morning, David was joined by 2 newer trainers, Amy Rodriguez and Keith Parker. Both had recently completed their basic training but were still months away from being cleared for water work. Their job was to maintain safety positions around the tank while observing and assisting David from the dry side of the pool. The session began smoothly with Thor responding to David's bridge signals, short blasts from a whistle that told the orca he had completed a behavior correctly. At 10:45 a.m., everything changed. As David guided Thor through a set of basic relationship behaviors, Keith made a critical mistake. He left his designated position near the emergency signal podium to get a closer look at David's hand signals. The move seemed minor, but it created a secondary point of focus for Thor. The orca's eyes shifted between David and Keith, a known precursor to incidents documented in marine parks worldwide. David noticed the shift immediately and began backing away while maintaining his bridge signal, a standard response to defuse the situation. But then Amy made the second fatal error. Seeing David step back, she left her post as well, moving toward the edge of the tank. Suddenly, Thor had multiple moving targets. His behavior changed instantly. His previous smooth movements grew erratic, his dorsal fin cutting sharp angles through the water. Without warning, Thor surged forward. His massive head burst from the water with terrifying speed, and before David could react, the orca's jaws clamped around his torso. The force of the bite shattered ribs and pulled David into the pool. Chaos erupted. Amy panicked and pressed the wrong button on the signal podium, triggering the park's show-ending music instead of the emergency siren. Thor, conditioned to associate that sound with positive reinforcement, grew even more agitated. Keith abandoned his post entirely, running toward the pool with a bucket of fish, a move strictly forbidden in emergency protocols. The proper emergency response team, stationed 4 minutes away at the park's central first aid station, wasn't alerted until a maintenance worker noticed the commotion and triggered the correct alarm. During those critical first moments, Thor dragged David to the bottom of the 40-foot pool, holding him underwater for 30 to 45 seconds at a time. Senior trainer Lisa Hammond arrived 90 seconds into the incident and immediately saw the chaos. Amy was frantically cycling through incorrect signals while Keith waved the bucket at Thor. The underwater tone box, the device that should have been activated to recall Thor to the medical pool, sat untouched at Keith's abandoned station. Lisa shouted for Amy and Keith to clear the area, but Thor was beyond control. Each time David surfaced, gasping for air, Thor would pull him back down with increasing force. The orca slammed him into the tank walls, his thrashing growing more violent with each passing second. The rapid response team arrived at the 4-minute mark, but by then, David had been submerged multiple times. When Thor finally released him, his body floated near the medical pool, unresponsive. Paramedics rushed David to Tampa General Hospital, but the damage was too severe. The initial bite had crushed his ribcage, causing internal bleeding, but it was the prolonged submersion that proved fatal. Despite resuscitation efforts, David was pronounced dead at 11:27 a.m. Later, autopsy results showed that the initial bite shattered 5 ribs and punctured his left lung, while drowning was listed as the official cause of death due to prolonged submersion. The investigation that followed uncovered a series of troubling oversights. While Ocean View had updated its emergency protocols after a high-profile incident at another marine park in 2010, those protocols hadn't been properly enforced. Security footage revealed that neither Amy nor Keith had ever participated in a full emergency simulation, a clear violation of federal regulations requiring monthly drills for all Orca facility staff. OSHA's report highlighted multiple failures. The emergency signal podium wasn't clearly marked with protocol steps, unlike other major facilities that use color-coded buttons and written instructions. The underwater tone box hadn't been tested in over 3 weeks, violating industry standards that required weekly equipment checks. Most damning of all, the park had allowed the session to proceed with only one fully qualified trainer present. Thor was immediately suspended from performances. Within months, he was transferred to a marine facility in Spain with stricter protocols and more experienced staff. He never performed with trainers in the water again. Ocean View Marine World faced severe consequences. OSHA issued $2.5 million in fines for safety violations, the largest penalty ever levied against a marine park. Attendance plummeted as footage of the incident spread online, and within 2 years, the park closed its doors permanently. David Mitchell's death led to sweeping changes across the industry. New regulations required quarterly third-party audits of emergency procedures, mandatory videotaped drills, and annual certification for all staff working near orca pools. His story became required study material in marine mammal training courses, a stark lesson on how even the smallest mistakes can have catastrophic consequences. When working with the ocean's apex predators, no amount of experience can fully mitigate the risks. Their sheer power and unpredictability can turn even the most routine interaction into a life-or-death struggle. In those brief, chaotic moments, a single misstep or overlooked signal can set off a chain of events from which there is no turning back. Thank you for watching. Loro Park, perched along the rugged coastline of Puerto de la Cruz in Tenerife, is a world-renowned sanctuary for some of nature's most awe-inspiring creatures. Spanning 135,000 square meters of lush greenery and vibrant habitats, it welcomes millions of visitors each year, drawn to its extraordinary collection of wildlife. What began as a haven for parrots had over the years blossomed into something far greater, an experience home to dolphins, penguins, and the commanding presence of orcas in its famed Orca Ocean exhibit. The early 2000s marked a turning point for the park, as it ventured into marine life, transforming it into a magnet for thrill seekers and animal lovers alike. At the heart of its appeal were the Orca shows, mesmerizing displays of strength, intelligence, and sheer beauty. Audiences marveled as these marine giants leapt into the air, their powerful tails sending cascades of water into the cheering crowds. Yet behind the sparkling waters of the Orca Ocean, a quieter, more complex reality simmered beneath the surface. Tekoa, a 6-year-old male orca weighing over 1,500 kilograms, was one of the stars of the show. His size and power were captivating, but for those who worked closely with him, Tekoa's story was more complicated. Trainers like Claudia had spent years forging a bond with him, learning to read his subtle cues, each flick of a tail or tilt of his massive head revealing hints of his mood. But orcas are wild creatures, their instincts and emotions often inscrutable. While Tekoa had displayed moments of aggression before, they were fleeting, never quite enough to sound the alarm. Until now. What no one could have predicted was how quickly things could change. Beneath the polished surface of the performance, there was an unspoken truth. Even the most skilled trainers could only guess at the storm brewing in Tekoa's mind. And sometimes the waters of Orca Ocean, no matter how crystal clear, could conceal the darkest of depths. Tekoa's early life was marked by disruption. Just months after his birth, he was separated from his mother, Taima, due to her growing aggression, a behavior that had been seen with her previous calves. This aggression was believed to stem from a traumatic experience in her past, where she witnessed her mother, Gudrun, attempt to drown her disabled calf. After the separation, Tekoa was raised by Kalina, a more experienced female orca, and often paired with his half-brother Tuar. Their bond became one of the few constants in Tekoa's turbulent life. In 2004, Tekoa and Tuar were transferred to SeaWorld San Antonio, where they joined a new group of orcas. His time at SeaWorld and later at Loro Park only intensified the challenges he faced, as he often endured aggression from his peers, leaving visible marks from countless confrontations. Despite these challenges, Tekoa grew into a powerful and unpredictable animal, shaped by a complex past that likely influenced the aggression he would later direct toward his trainers. Claudia Volhart, a 29-year-old marine biologist from Weinheim, Germany, was one of Tekoa's devoted trainers. For her, working with orcas had always been a thrilling and natural experience. Europe's only female orca trainer, Claudia had spent years at Loro Park, building deep bonds with creatures that most people would only ever glimpse from a distance. A former model turned marine biologist, her shift from the fashion world to the depths of the Orca Ocean had always felt like fate. Through unwavering dedication, she had earned her place at the park, and in the water, she felt an almost mystical connection with Tekoa. But today, as she prepared for another session, an unusual tension hung in the air. It was just another training session, or so it seemed. Claudia stood at the edge of the pool, awaiting Tekoa's signal. His enormous form cut through the water, his dorsal fin slicing through the surface. He approached her calmly as if to reassure her that nothing was amiss. The session was simple. Tekoa was supposed to nudge Claudia's feet with his snout as they swam together, a typical exercise that highlighted the synchronicity between trainer and orca. Claudia reached out, feeling the cold, smooth surface of the water beneath her. Her movements were fluid, practiced. Tekoa's powerful body surged forward, but something was off. His usual grace was replaced with an unsettling force. She didn't have time to react. In an instant, Tekoa's snout collided with her chest, knocking the air from her lungs. The impact was sudden and Claudia's body slammed against the water with a force that reverberated through her bones. Before she could take another breath, Tekoa surged forward again, and the full weight of his body struck her once more, sending her spiraling beneath the water. Her arms flailed as she tried to stabilize herself, but the water was now a blur of cold, unforgiving depths. Then came the sensation of being pulled, not with gentle guidance, but with the raw, unrelenting strength of an animal that could easily overpower her. Tekoa's massive form dragged her downward, his teeth grazing her arm as he pulled her into the abyss of the pool's deepest point, 40 feet below the surface. A moment of weightlessness, then the pressure of the water, the sheer depth pushing against her chest, constricting her lungs. Claudia's vision blurred, the world around her fading as the sound of rushing water drowned out everything else. Tekoa's teeth clamped down on her arm, sharp and firm, the feeling like nothing she had ever encountered before. Her mind raced, and yet she couldn't summon the strength to break free. She kicked desperately, but there was no escaping his grip. Seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. Then, as quickly as it had begun, the force pulling her down released. Tekoa resurfaced, his teeth still clutching her arm, and his powerful muscles propelled them both back to the surface. The air was cold against her face as she gasped for breath, struggling to stay conscious. The world around her came into focus, but the pain in her arm and chest was overwhelming. She tried to scream, but all that emerged was a strangled gasp. Her colleagues who had been standing by the poolside saw the danger unfolding. Without a moment's hesitation, they rushed to the edge, pulling her from the water and away from the grasp of the orca. Claudia's body was limp, her chest heaving as they hauled her to safety. She could barely comprehend what had just happened. The attack, that's what it had been, an attack, had happened so quickly, so unexpectedly, that even she had trouble accepting it. The trainers worked in a blur of action, and soon Claudia was rushed to the hospital. Miraculously, she survived the attack, but her injuries were severe: a broken elbow, a bruised lung, and deep internal trauma. As doctors worked to stabilize her, it became clear that the physical wounds were only part of the ordeal. The mental toll would linger long after the bruises faded. Back at Loro Park, the reality of the situation began to set in. Tekoa had always been a powerful animal, but no one had anticipated that he would lash out with such violence. His previous behaviors had been seen as quirks, not threats, but now the trainers knew the risks more intimately. The park's management decided that water-based training with Tekoa would be suspended indefinitely. The decision, though made in haste, was a painful acknowledgement of the risks inherent in working with orcas. For Claudia, recovery was a slow process, marked by the enduring scars of the attack. The park itself faced irreversible changes. Trainers no longer entered the water with Tekoa, and the once thrilling shows took on a somber tone. Questions about the ethics of captivity grew louder, as Tekoa's actions became a stark reminder of the unpredictable nature of even the most trained wild animals, challenging the illusion of control over creatures of such immense power. Claudia's story may have shocked the world, but the real victims are the orcas themselves, forced into a life of captivity they never chose. While trainers willingly step into this world, the orcas are confined, their natural instincts suppressed. Our next story focuses on Kandu, an orca whose tragic story reveals the devastating consequences of keeping these majestic creatures in captivity. What started as a thrilling orca show on Christmas Eve at Loro Park Zoo ended in tragedy for star trainer Alexis Martinez. At the peak of his career, Alexis had spent countless hours working with Quito, the orca he'd trained and trusted for years. But in an instant, that trust was shattered in what would become his final performance. Born and raised in Spain, Alexis Martinez had always held a deep fascination for animals. He started working at Loro Park Zoo in 2004, about the time the park introduced orcas to its marine life exhibits. This opportunity had been a dream come true for Alexis, who quickly rose through the ranks to become one of the park's leading trainers. At just 29, he was already recognized for his talent, calm demeanor, and dedication to his work. By the time of the incident, Loro Park housed 4 orcas and employed a small team of specialized trainers, each carefully chosen for their ability to work with these powerful animals. Keto was born in captivity in 1995 at SeaWorld Orlando, far from the wild waters where orcas truly belong. He knew nothing but the confinement of marine tanks, where he was groomed to perform from a young age, trained to execute precise routines for the thrill of a watching crowd. By 2006, he was transferred thousands of miles across the Atlantic to Loro Park in the Canary Islands, where he became a main attraction. But Keto was not just a showpiece. At over 6,600 pounds, he embodied the raw, untamed power of the ocean. Behind those controlled performances lay an unpredictable force, and even with rigorous training, there was always an edge of risk. His immense size, combined with an instinctive power, brought an underlying and constant tension to every interaction. Keto may have been born in captivity, but lurking within was the mind and muscle of a predator, a creature that could turn in an instant. And that Christmas Eve in 2009 would become a day that no trainer or guest at Loro Park would ever forget. The show unfolded with all the excitement and awe the audience had come to expect. Families watched in anticipation, eyes fixed on Alexis and the powerful orca by his side. For Alexis, this night was a chance to display the deep connection and skill built over years with Keto. He had worked tirelessly to perfect each movement, every flip and glide, and tonight it all came together. He was the star trainer, known for his bond with the orcas and his captivating performances, and this night would be no exception. As Alexis slipped into the water, Keto moved beside him, an enormous, sleek form cutting through the pool. Together they danced, a display of strength and elegance rehearsed to perfection. Each command seemed to unlock a moment of brilliance from the orca. Trainers along the edge, including Brian Roich, stood ready, their eyes trained on every flick of Keto's tail and rise of Alexis's hand. The crowd cheered louder with each feat, their applause swelling with every flawless move. Yet, as the performance reached its peak, a tension began to fill the air. Keto's movements shifted, his massive body slowing, his powerful tail cutting through the water with a new intensity. Alexis continued, steady and poised, guiding Keto with a calm certainty. But suddenly, Keto blocked his path, his immense body pressing into the space where Alexis needed to move. The crowd watched, captivated, unaware of the shift. In a terrifying instant, Keto's playful energy turned deadly. With a powerful lunge, he rammed Alexis, pinning him to the bottom of the 40-foot pool. Was this just a display of dominance or something far darker? The audience remained silent, captivated yet unaware, while trainers shouted commands that fell on deaf ears. Keto, locked in, seemed unstoppable, and what had started as a routine show had turned into a nightmare unfolding before their eyes. The horrified crowd, paralyzed by shock, began to realize they were witnessing one of the darkest moments in SeaWorld's history. Was this the moment that would finally shatter the illusion of control over these powerful animals? In that moment, the water turned from a stage to a battleground. Keto rammed Alexis again and again, crushing him against the walls of the tank, his massive body shuddering with each impact. Above, the trainers acted fast, sending signals and calling for emergency measures, but Keto held his ground, defying every attempt to separate him from the trainer. The orca surfaced briefly, lifting Alexis's body on his nose, as if presenting him to the stunned audience before dragging him back down into the depths. When Keto finally released him, Alexis's lifeless form lay at the bottom of the tank, his injuries devastating, his body bearing the brutal marks of Keto's force. The rescue team rushed to pull him from the water, but it was already too late. Alexis had died from his injuries. The park fell silent, the cheers replaced by the weight of what had just occurred. In the aftermath of Alexis Martinez's shocking death, Loro Park came under intense scrutiny. The park's initial explanation, drowning, quickly unraveled under the harsh truth of the autopsy. Multiple fractures, crushed organs, and clear bite marks told a different story, one of a brutal attack. Was this an isolated tragedy, or was it part of a pattern? Just 3 years earlier, trainer Claudia Volhard had suffered a similar fate, pulled underwater and battered by an orca, an incident the park brushed off as accidental. Could there be a deeper issue lurking beneath the surface? The fallout from Alexis's death reverberated throughout the marine entertainment industry. Loro Park suspended all in-water performances with orcas, an unprecedented pause for the park as they reassessed safety protocols and introduced stricter barriers between trainers and orcas. The incident contributed to a growing movement questioning the ethics of keeping these intelligent, powerful animals in captivity, pushing both Loro Park and other parks to reconsider the future of orca shows. The loss of Alexis Martinez stunned trainers everywhere, leading many to reconsider what it meant to work alongside these animals. But just months later, another seasoned trainer would face an even more dramatic turn. At SeaWorld Orlando, Dawn Brancheau prepared to perform, unaware that her deep bond with a 22-foot orca would soon unravel in front of a packed audience. This was no ordinary performance. It would be her last, a moment that would forever change the way the world saw killer whales. March 15, 2008 began like any other maintenance day at Pacific Coast Marine World in Newport, Oregon. Known for its intimate shows and personal approach to marine animal care, the park had built a loyal following despite its modest size. Unlike larger parks like SeaWorld, Pacific Coast Marine World prided itself on up-close interactions, where trainers often performed side by side with the animals in the water. At the heart of the park was Kenzo, a 22-foot, 12,000-pound male orca captured off the coast of Iceland in 1989. Over nearly 2 decades, Kenzo had become a symbol of the park, a magnificent creature with a reputation for being both awe-inspiring and unpredictable. His trainers respected him deeply but always remained cautious. Kenzo had been known to test boundaries, especially when routines were disrupted. In 2005, Kenzo had displayed signs of agitation, though trainers successfully de-escalated the situation without injury. Orcas, often called killer whales, are among the most intelligent and powerful predators in the ocean. Known for their complex social structures and problem-solving abilities, they hunt everything from fish to seals and even other whales. In the wild, orcas can travel up to 100 miles a day, working in coordinated pods to chase down prey. But in captivity, their natural instincts often collide with the limitations of their environment. Frustration, boredom, and stress can lead to unpredictable behavior, making them one of the most dangerous marine animals to work with. Despite their beauty and intelligence, orcas in captivity have been involved in multiple fatal incidents, a stark reminder of the wildness that lies beneath their trained routines. Marcus Davidson, 34, had been working at Pacific Coast Marine World for nearly 5 years. From a young age, Marcus had been fascinated by marine life. Raised on the Oregon coast, he spent his childhood exploring tide pools and devouring every book he could find on whales and dolphins. After earning a degree in marine biology, he began his career as a trainer at a small park in Washington before moving to Newport. Those who knew Marcus described him as passionate and kind, with an unwavering dedication to his animals. He believed in building trust with the creatures under his care and often spoke of the deep connection he felt with Kenzo. Over the years, the two had developed a bond that few others at the park could match. Marcus spent hours with the orca, perfecting routines and learning to read the animal's subtle body language. But Kenzo was still a wild animal, and Marcus knew the risks. Marcus usually worked with two other trainers, Sarah Collins and Mike Peterson, but on that day, both called in sick with food poisoning from a local restaurant. Rather than cancel the morning training session, Marcus decided to proceed alone. The park was closed that day for routine maintenance, and he saw it as an opportunity for some one-on-one time with Kenzo. At 7:32 a.m., Marcus walked into the main trainer prep room, just as the maintenance crew was starting their day. The morning fog still hung over the stadium, creating an unusual atmosphere around the normally bustling facility. Only Tom Wheeler, the security guard, and two other maintenance workers were present, all focused on their own tasks in different areas of the park. The fog hung low over the stadium as Marcus prepared for the session. Standing at the edge of the pool, he slapped the water's surface to call Kenzo up for a relationship session, a routine designed to strengthen the bond between trainer and animal. At first, Kenzo didn't respond. He lingered at the bottom of the pool, his massive form barely visible through the water. The first warning sign came during the initial relationship session. Kenzo remained at the bottom of the pool, his massive form unusually still. Marcus noted the behavior but continued with the training plan. As he slapped the water's surface, Kenzo finally emerged. But something was different. His movements were erratic, his massive dorsal fin cutting through the water at unusual angles. The 12,000-pound orca circled the pool, ignoring Marcus's signals, behavior that should have sent the experienced trainer backing away from the water. Instead, Marcus moved closer, determined to connect with the animal. He reached for a bucket of fish, hoping to regain Kenzo's attention. That's when everything changed. The attack came without warning. Kenzo's massive form erupted from the water, jaws open wide. Before Marcus could react, the orca's teeth clamped down on his right leg, dragging him into the cold water. The force of the bite shattered his femur instantly. At 7:48 a.m., the incident began, lasting for 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Security footage showed the horrifying sequence of events. Kenzo thrashed Marcus through the water, dragging him 15 feet across the pool and to the bottom of the 40-foot tank before surfacing again. Blood clouded the pool as Marcus struggled to free himself, gasping for air each time he broke the surface. The water, maintained at a frigid 55 degrees Fahrenheit, began to sap his strength almost immediately. Hearing the commotion, Tom Wheeler ran from his security post, followed closely by the maintenance workers. But without proper rescue equipment or training, there was little they could do. The men shouted and clapped, trying to distract Kenzo, but the orca was locked in a predatory focus, refusing to release his grip. Kenzo continued his assault, repeatedly dragging Marcus to the bottom of the 40-foot tank. Each time the trainer surfaced, gasping for air, the orca would pull him under again. The water temperature, maintained at 55 degrees Fahrenheit for the orca's comfort, began to shut down Marcus's body systems. When first responders finally arrived at 8:12 a.m., they found Marcus's body floating in the blood-stained water. The autopsy would later reveal that while the massive trauma and blood loss from his severed leg had been devastating, it was drowning that ultimately ended his life. The investigation that followed exposed a series of critical failures. Pacific Coast Marine World had no clear protocol for solo training sessions, and the decision to proceed without a spotter violated basic safety standards. OSHA fined the park $1.2 million for safety violations, and within 6 months, the facility was forced to close its doors permanently. Kenzo was transferred to a larger facility in San Diego, where he lived out the rest of his life without further incident. He never performed with trainers in the water again. Marcus's death led to a critical reevaluation of safety protocols in smaller marine parks. While larger facilities had already restricted in-water interactions, Pacific Coast Marine World's failure to implement similar measures turned the tragedy into a cautionary tale. The incident underscored the need for multiple trainers on site, enhanced emergency response training, and a deeper awareness of the risks when working with powerful marine predators. But Marcus's story was just the beginning. Another shocking incident soon made headlines: the tragic death of the youngest female orca trainer. Let's get straight into this horrific next story. Blue Horizon Oceanic Park, nestled in San Diego, California, stood as a premier marine attraction, renowned for offering more than just its famous orca performances. Visitors were captivated by its cutting-edge aquariums, interactive dolphin experiences, and a vibrant coral reef exhibit. However, the park's true centerpiece was Neptune, a massive 20-foot-long, 10,000-pound male orca whose mesmerizing shows drew thousands of spectators weekly. As the park's biggest star and financial cornerstone, Neptune performed 6 electrifying shows each week, anchoring the park's success and solidifying its reputation as a must-visit destination. But behind the scenes, not everything was as seamless as it appeared. Trainers had reported increasingly erratic behavior from Neptune, who was known to slap his tail against the tank walls and refuse commands. Despite the warnings, Blue Horizon management insisted the show continue, citing the orca's massive contribution to the park's revenue. Maris Ellington, a 27-year-old marine biologist, had worked tirelessly to achieve her position as Neptune's primary handler. Growing up along Oregon's rugged coastline, she developed a deep love for marine life. After earning her degree, Maris joined Blue Horizon, where her care and dedication quickly earned her respect among her colleagues. She took pride in her bond with Neptune, often dismissing concerns about his behavior, convinced she could manage him. However, not everyone shared her optimism. A senior trainer had stepped forward months earlier, expressing serious concerns about Neptune's increasing aggression and isolation. This trainer requested that Neptune be retired or at least removed from performances. Management denied the request, and the trainer, unwilling to participate in what they saw as unsafe conditions, quit in protest. The trainer's warnings would later become a key part of the fallout from the tragedy. By the time of the afternoon performance, Maris had already completed one show earlier that day. The earlier performance had gone smoothly, and the amphitheater was once again filling with excited families and children eager to see Neptune's powerful leaps and synchronized routines. Despite Neptune's erratic behavior in recent months, Maris seemed confident, telling colleagues she felt he was in a good mood today. Trainers reviewed the cues and safety protocols one last time, though a lingering unease hung in the air. As the music swelled and the announcer welcomed the crowd, the show began. Neptune glided into the tank with his characteristic grace, earning cheers from the audience of approximately 500 people. The performance started flawlessly, with Neptune completing his initial routines under Maris's guidance. The crowd roared with approval as he performed a high breach, soaking the front rows with a massive splash. For a moment, it seemed like Neptune was back to his usual self. The finale was the highlight of the show, a synchronized swim between Maris and Neptune, a routine meant to display their bond and the orca's agility. As Maris entered the water, Neptune circled her, his immense black and white body cutting through the clear water. Maris signaled for him to perform a breach beside her, and for a moment it seemed like he would comply. But suddenly, Neptune veered off course. Without warning, he turned and lunged at Maris, his powerful jaws clamping around her midsection. The force of the attack sent her head briefly above the water, and she heard the horrified screams of the audience before Neptune yanked her back under. Trainers on the platform immediately sprang into action, deploying distraction techniques they hoped would calm the orca. Brightly colored buoys and ropes were tossed into the tank, followed by a bucket of fish. Two trainers activated long poles designed to nudge Neptune away, but his thrashing made it impossible to intervene without risking further harm. As Neptune slammed Maris against the tank walls, her limp body broke the surface again, only to be dragged back under moments later. The audience watched in horror, some shielding their children from the gruesome scene, others frozen in disbelief. Neptune finally released her after over a minute of thrashing, and her lifeless body floated to the surface. Rescue divers entered the tank within seconds and pulled her to the deck, where medics worked frantically to revive her. The injuries were catastrophic: multiple fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and severe blunt force trauma to her chest and abdomen. Despite their efforts, Maris was pronounced dead at the scene. The aftermath was chaotic. Guests were evacuated from the park as emergency personnel arrived, and the amphitheater was cordoned off. Within hours, Blue Horizon announced the suspension of all Orca shows, a decision that would later become permanent. The tragedy led to significant legal repercussions for Blue Horizon. Maris's parents, devastated by the loss of their only child, filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the park, citing negligence in ignoring repeated warnings about Neptune's aggression and the dangers of isolating him. The lawsuit also highlighted inadequate safety measures and the management's decision to continue performances despite the known risks. The case never reached the courtroom. After extended negotiations, Blue Horizon's management agreed to a significant settlement with Maris's family. While the specific terms remained confidential, the agreement highlighted the park's acknowledgement of responsibility and its desire to protect its public image. As part of the settlement, Blue Horizon also committed to supporting marine conservation initiatives and funding independent research into the mental health of captive orcas, signaling a step toward addressing broader concerns. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the marine park industry, sparking intense debates about orca captivity. Blue Horizon permanently banned orca shows but kept its other attractions, including dolphin encounters, aquariums, and conservation-focused exhibits. However, the loss of its star attraction led to declining attendance and mounting financial struggles. Within a few years, the park filed for bankruptcy and closed its doors. Neptune was relocated to a marine sanctuary in British Columbia, where he could live in a more natural environment. For Maris's family, her loss remained a painful reminder of the risks in working with powerful wild animals. Orca accidents have captured global attention, often unfolding in high-profile marine parks across the United States, a country known for its glittering entertainment and world-famous shows. But tragedy strikes beyond America's borders too. In Tenerife, a chilling orca incident changed everything for Claudia Volhart, a 29-year-old marine biologist, in the most devastating way imaginable. July 18, 2010 began as a typical summer day in Santa Barbara, California. The sun shone over Pacific Horizon's Marine Park, where families gathered for the afternoon's performance. The crowd eagerly awaited the Orca show, with Boreas, the park's 21-foot star, ready to perform. Known for his sleek black and white markings and powerful movements, Boreas was the main attraction, captivating the audience with his grace. Yet, despite the excitement, something that would soon shatter the illusion of control. Pacific Horizon's Marine Park had been founded in 1992 by Robert Layton. Initially focused on educational exhibits and marine life rescue, Layton's vision was to create a more intimate connection between visitors and the ocean. However, as competition grew, the park expanded its attractions in the early 2000s to remain competitive. By 2005, it had rebranded itself as a premier destination, securing major investments and bringing in larger, more dramatic exhibits. The park's new star was Boreas, a 21-foot male orca. Boreas, marketed as the largest and most majestic orca on the West Coast, quickly became the centerpiece of the park's growing appeal. Born in 1992 off the coast of Norway, Boreas was captured at the age of 5, torn from his pod, and sold into captivity. Life in confinement proved difficult for him, and signs of his distress were evident from the start. Researchers noted his unnatural vocalizations and periods of isolation, suggesting he had never fully adjusted to life in captivity. Despite these signs, Pacific Horizons pushed Boreas to perform, and his breathtaking breaches and graceful movements made him the star attraction, drawing in crowds who marveled at his power and beauty. Yet, beneath his polished performances, the tension between his wild instincts and life in captivity continued to grow. At the heart of Pacific Horizon's success was Zane Marston, a 35-year-old marine biologist and trainer who had grown up surrounded by the park's exhibits and animals. Drawn to marine life from an early age, Zane had spent years shadowing trainers, learning the ins and outs of animal care and performance. His deep connection to the park was personal, as he had always felt a sense of duty to his uncle Robert Layton, the park's founder. Zane's natural talent with marine animals and his passion for conservation made him the perfect fit for training Boreas, the park's star orca. Over the years, Zane developed a unique bond with Boreas, often referring to the orca not just as a performer, but as a friend and partner, a connection that became the foundation of their many successful performances. But by 2009, cracks began to appear in Boreas's behavior. Trainers noticed signs of agitation, tail slapping, refusal to perform, and episodes of vocal distress that suggested the orca was struggling. Zane, concerned for Boreas's well-being, recommended reducing his workload and giving him more time for enrichment. However, these concerns were dismissed by the park's management, who were more focused on maintaining high visitor numbers and profits. Despite these warnings, Zane remained committed to his work with Boreas, believing their bond would keep the situation under control. On July 18, 2010, the stage was set for another performance, one that was supposed to be just like the others. Boreas thrilled the crowd with his stunning breaches and synchronized movements. Zane, confident in their partnership, prepared for the grand finale, an in-water routine where he would swim alongside Boreas, showcasing the bond they had spent years building. But as the act unfolded, something unexpected happened. Without warning, Boreas veered off course. His sleek body, once moving in perfect harmony with Zane's cues, suddenly turned. Zane, submerged in the water beside him, tried to regain control, but Boreas was no longer responding. In an instant, the orca lunged toward him with shocking speed. The audience gasped in disbelief as Boreas's powerful jaws clamped around Zane's torso. He was dragged underwater with terrifying force, his body thrashing in the orca's grip. Zane struggled, but Boreas's hold was unrelenting, dragging him deeper into the tank. The crowd erupted into chaos, unsure if this was part of the act or something much worse. Trainers on the platform screamed for help, throwing buoys and fish into the water in a desperate attempt to distract Boreas. But the orca was consumed by aggression, thrashing violently in the water as Zane's body was tossed like a rag doll. For nearly 2 minutes, the attack continued. Boreas's massive form seemed unstoppable as he dragged Zane deeper into the water, shaking him with brutal force. Zane fought to break free, but his strength was no match for the orcas. The audience, stunned and paralyzed with horror, could only watch as the chaos unfolded. Then, suddenly, Boreas released Zane, and his limp body floated to the surface. Divers scrambled into the water, pulling Zane from the tank, but it was too late. His injuries were catastrophic: fractured ribs, a punctured lung, and severe internal bleeding. Medics rushed to his side, performing CPR at the edge of the tank, but it was clear that the damage was irreparable. Zane was pronounced dead at the scene. The aftermath of Zane's death was swift and devastating. Critics accused Pacific Horizons of negligence, pointing to ignored warnings about Boreas's behavior. Animal rights groups seized on the tragedy, using it to fuel their campaigns against the captivity of orcas. Protests erupted outside the park, calling for justice and demanding an end to the exploitation of marine mammals. Zane's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, revealing internal communications that showed Zane's concerns had been dismissed by management. The lawsuit was settled, but the damage to the park's reputation was irreparable. Within a year, Pacific Horizons closed its doors for good, and Boreas was relocated to a marine sanctuary in Iceland, where he could live freely. The incident had lasting effects on the industry, reigniting the debate over the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Zane's bond with Boreas ended in a violent outburst. But what happens when the line between trainer and animal is crossed not by aggression but by desperation? Lena Weston's connection with the orca Nero seemed unshakable, until the very animal she trusted most turned on her. Was it simply a moment of miscommunication or something deeper? As Lila would soon find out, even the closest relationships can fracture when the raw instincts of a wild animal come to the forefront. For as long as she could remember, Emily Cadeau had been captivated by the powerful, enigmatic presence of orcas. Each summer, she would visit Blue Waters Marine Park, drawn by the deep bond between trainers and the ocean's largest predators. Over the years, her bedroom walls became covered with posters of animals she loved, and her fascination grew stronger with each visit. Her childhood dream was clear. One day, she would stand among her heroes, working side by side with these majestic creatures. Blue Waters Marine Park was a renowned facility that showcased the beauty of marine life while championing conservation. Through captivating performances and interactive exhibits, it inspired countless children to dream big and nurtured a passion for marine animals, encouraging many to pursue careers in marine biology and animal training. Emily was one of those children, her dreams shaped by the wonders she witnessed there. Now, at 28, she had achieved her dream, standing on the platform at Blue Waters Marine Park where her mentors had once stood. With nearly a decade of experience, she was now one of the park's most skilled trainers. Her bond with Nayar, the park's star orca, was strong, built on countless hours of practice, patience, and trust. Blue Waters felt more like a home to Emily than any place on land. Her friends often joked that she practically lived at the park, and in truth it was almost accurate. Nayar in particular was at the center of her world. However, in recent weeks, Emily had noticed subtle changes in Nayar's behavior. It wasn't anything overt, just small signs that only someone who knew her well would catch. Nayar seemed slightly more restless and somewhat distant. That morning, Emily shared her concerns with her team, expressing unease over the orca's mood. They reassured her that it was likely nothing serious, just a passing phase. Though comforted by their words, Emily found it hard to push her worries aside, hoping the show would go smoothly as always. Little did she know, her concerns would prove well-founded, though the realization would come far too late. Orcas, or killer whales, are magnificent yet untamable creatures of the sea, their intelligence matched by a raw power that few animals can rival. Known as apex predators, they hunt seals, fish, and even other whales with incredible precision. In the wild, orcas roam hundreds of miles, navigating the ocean's depths with an independence that captivates and commands respect. Trainers understand this well, recognizing that the orca's wild nature always lurks beneath the surface. Yet, amidst the daily routines and familiar interactions, it's easy to forget that these beautiful animals are not merely performers. They are wild beings capable of instinct and strength that no amount of training can fully contain. The performance began without a hitch. Nayar moved through her opening routines gracefully, leaping high into the air and splashing back down with a force that sent waves crashing across the tank. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Emily felt a flicker of relief. Perhaps she had just been overthinking things. But as the show went on, an uneasy feeling settled in. Nayar's movements became sharper, unpredictable in a way that set Emily's nerves on edge. Only she could see it. The crowd was oblivious, caught up in the excitement, but something felt off. Nayar was circling faster than usual, her dorsal fin cutting through the water with a speed that made Emily uneasy. Finally, they reached the finale. It was their signature move, and the crowd always loved it. Emily dove into the tank, plunging into the cool water as the audience's cheers surged around her. As she descended, the familiar thrill of the performance took over, and she signaled to Nayar to join her. Nayar swam close, her massive shadow passing beneath Emily, closer than usual. Emily reached out a hand, signaling Nayar to back up slightly. Then, before she could fully register what was happening, Nayar's behavior took a frightening turn. In an instant, Nayar's massive 21-foot, 11,500-pound body surged forward, and before Emily could react, the orca's powerful jaws clamped down on her leg. The grip was fierce, an overwhelming strength that dragged her downward with brutal force. The water exploded into chaos as Nayar pulled Emily deeper, twisting and thrashing. Panic surged, but her training kicked in as she tried to free herself, her mind racing even as she felt the icy sting of pain shoot through her leg. Blood began to cloud the water around them as Nayar's grip tightened. In the stands, the crowd's cheers turned to gasps, then horrified screams as the reality of the situation dawned on them. Emily's parents were there, watching, their joy shattered as they saw her struggle. Her mother's voice broke through the noise, her cries frantic and helpless. Along the edge of the tank, trainers sprang into action, throwing ropes, shouting commands, and trying to reach Emily. But it was clear that nothing was breaking through Nayar's grip. Emily's movement slowed as her strength faded. She reached toward the surface, her hand breaking through for a brief, desperate moment before Nayar pulled her back under. The water around them was dark now, tinged red as Emily's fight weakened. The orca continued to thrash, her body moving with a terrifying, relentless power that left the trainers on the edge of the tank frozen with helplessness. Then, as quickly as it had begun, it was over. Nayar released her grip, and Emily's body floated slowly toward the surface. Rescue divers reached her within seconds, pulling her limp form from the tank, but it was already too late. The audience was silent, the park blanketed in shock. What had started as a joyful display had ended in tragedy, and the news of Emily Cadeau's death spread quickly, casting a long shadow over Blue Waters. In the days that followed, Blue Waters Marine Park shut down all orca performances, and the gates eventually closed for good. Emily's friends and family held a quiet memorial by the ocean honoring the life of a woman who had dedicated herself to the animal she loved. Her parents, heartbroken, shared stories of her passion, and her friends stood in silence, grappling with the loss of someone so young, so full of life. Those who had been there that day were left with a haunting reminder. Despite the years of training and care, the wild could never truly be tamed. Nayar's actions were a chilling reminder of that truth, and Emily's memory remained tied to the sea she had loved so dearly. However, while Emily's tragic experience highlighted the unpredictable nature of marine life, it wasn't the only incident that questioned the boundaries between humans and orcas. Just a few years earlier at SeaWorld San Diego, trainer Tamari Tollison found herself at the mercy of the very creatures she revered, revealing the thin line that separates admiration from peril. It was July 8, 2002 at SeaWorld San Diego, a place where families gathered to watch marine life perform. Among the trainers was Tamari Tollison, a dedicated 28-year-old who had always dreamed of working with orcas. With years of experience under her belt, she felt a deep connection to the animals, especially two orcas named Orchid and Splash. This day began like any other, with trainers preparing for the afternoon show. Tamari walked to Shamu Stadium feeling the familiar thrill of anticipation. The stadium was packed, families eagerly awaiting the performance. Children pointed excitedly at the water, while parents settled into their seats with cameras in hand. Tamari loved sharing her passion for marine life, educating the audience about the orca's intelligence and grace. However, both orcas had histories that hinted at danger. Splash, originally named Katak, was born with health challenges including epilepsy. In 1995, he suffered a seizure that resulted in severe injuries, including damage to his jaw. Despite his resilience, the scars of his past served as a reminder of the hidden risks in training orcas. Orchid, a hybrid orca, also had a troubled background. Born at SeaWorld, she witnessed her mother's death during a performance, which shaped her behavior. In 2006, she attacked another trainer, pulling him underwater for nearly half a minute. These incidents were often overlooked in favor of entertainment, a horrific mistake that would later prove to be wrong. As the show began, Tamari signaled to Orchid and Splash. The audience watched in awe as the orcas leaped and splashed, demonstrating their training and agility. Each performance was a culmination of countless hours of practice, and Tamari felt immense pride watching her beloved orcas showcase their skills. Splash executed a perfect breach, sending a cascade of water over the edge of the pool, eliciting cheers from the crowd. However, as the routine continued, Tamari sensed a change in the water. The atmosphere shifted, and the behavior of the orcas became increasingly erratic. Orchid and Splash displayed signs of agitation, swimming closer together, creating ripples in the water that spoke of unease. Tamari furrowed her brow, trying to gauge what was troubling them. Perhaps it was the noise from the crowd, or maybe the heat of the day was making them uncomfortable. Determined to maintain control, Tamari attempted to redirect their attention with commands and gestures she had practiced countless times before. But today was different. The orcas seemed unresponsive to her signals, and their movements grew more aggressive. The excitement of the audience shifted to murmurs of confusion and concern. Tamari's heart raced as she watched the orcas circle in the water, their bodies tense and focused on one another. Then, without warning, Orchid lunged up from the water. Tamari barely had time to react as the massive orca clamped down on her foot, dragging her into the pool. A gasp rippled through the crowd, and panic set in as the screams of the audience echoed around the stadium. In an instant, Tamari was submerged, her body caught in the grip of a creature she had devoted her life to training. The water swirled around her as she struggled against the overwhelming force of Orchid's bite. Tamari's heart raced as she felt the cold water engulf her. She kicked and thrashed, her screams muffled beneath the surface. It was chaos. The other trainers on the platform shouted, desperately trying to pull her to safety. One trainer, Robin Sheet, recognized the danger and made a quick decision. She rushed to the adjoining pool, releasing a more dominant female orca named Kasaka, hoping the new arrival would disrupt the aggression between Orchid and Tamari. The moment Kasaka entered the tank, the dynamic shifted. Orchid released her grip and Tamari found her way to the surface, gasping for air. She had sustained severe injuries during the attack, including a compound fracture in her forearm. The shock of the incident left her shaken and in pain, but she was alive. As she reached the edge of the pool, fellow trainers pulled her up, their faces pale with fear. Tamari was rushed to the hospital where doctors treated her arm injuries. Medical staff worked quickly to assess the damage. As they treated her, reports of the incident began to emerge, detailing the performance and the unexpected attack that occurred in the water. This incident marked a turning point for SeaWorld. Videos circulated drawing attention to the dangers trainers faced while working with orcas. The event sparked debates about the ethics of keeping such intelligent creatures in captivity for entertainment. Tamari's experience was not just an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a larger issue regarding the treatment of marine mammals. Tamari's recovery was long and painful, with visible scars and lingering emotional trauma. When she returned to SeaWorld, fear and doubt replaced her joy, making her question the safety of her environment and the treatment of the orcas she loved. Despite the trauma, Tamari became a voice for change within the organization. She advocated for revised safety protocols, emphasizing the need for trainers to prioritize their well-being and the well-being of the animals. The attack raised broader questions about the nature of captivity. Advocates argue that orcas like Orchid and Splash deserve to live in environments that mimicked their natural habitats. As time passed, SeaWorld faced increasing scrutiny over its practices. The documentary Blackfish brought national attention to the issues surrounding captive orcas, featuring Tamari's harrowing experience. Public perception shifted, and discussions about the ethics of marine parks gained momentum. While Tamari survived the attack, the scars of that day served as a haunting reminder of the dangers trainers face. As time passed, those lessons began to fade. Meanwhile, over 1,000 miles away at Sealand of the Pacific, a young trainer was about to confront an orca with a dark past, an encounter that would become known as the most horrific orca attack ever recorded. On a crisp autumn morning in 1987, the sun cast a gentle glow over SeaWorld San Diego. The park was alive with the laughter of children and the excited chatter of families, all eager to witness the day's performances. The air was filled with the scent of saltwater and the distant calls of seagulls, creating an atmosphere of anticipation and joy. However, beneath the surface of this idyllic scene, a storm was brewing, one that would soon shatter the tranquility and leave an indelible mark on all who witnessed it. John Sillick, 26, stood backstage, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and nerves. A marine mammal trainer at SeaWorld, John had dedicated his life to working with orcas and dolphins. His passion for marine life had been evident since childhood, and he had worked tirelessly to turn his dream into a reality. Known for his dedication and skill, John had formed strong bonds with the animals under his care. Today, he was set to perform a routine with two of SeaWorld's most renowned orcas, Corky and Orky 2. Corky, a female orca, was a seasoned performer with a gentle demeanor. Captured in 1969, she had spent the majority of her life in captivity. Despite the challenges she faced, Corky had become a beloved figure at SeaWorld, known for her intelligence and grace. Her bond with John was evident. They had performed together countless times, their routines a symbol of their mutual trust and understanding. Orky 2, a male orca, was a mighty presence in the water. Captured in 1968, he had spent many years at SeaWorld, contributing to numerous performances. His size and strength were awe-inspiring, but his temperament was less predictable. While he had participated in many routines, there were occasional signs of restlessness and aggression, subtle cues that often went unnoticed in the excitement of the performances. As the show commenced, the audience was captivated by the synchronized movements of Corky and John. Their routine was a highlight of the performance, showcasing the deep connection between trainer and animal. The crowd cheered, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension that had begun to surface. Orky 2, who had been performing with another trainer, was now approaching the area where John and Corky were performing. His movements were more erratic than usual, his eyes wide and unfocused. John signaled for Corky to perform a breach, a move they had executed flawlessly countless times. Corky responded, propelling herself out of the water with grace. However, as she descended, Orky 2 leapt from the water, his massive body crashing down upon John and Corky. The impact was catastrophic. John was crushed beneath the weight of the two orcas, his body pinned between them. The audience gasped in horror as the scene unfolded before their eyes. Despite the efforts of the other trainers to distract him, the orcas remained unresponsive, their focus solely on the trapped trainer. It was only after what seemed like an eternity that Orky 2 and Corky finally retreated, allowing John to be pulled from the water. John was immediately transported to the hospital where he underwent multiple surgeries to repair the extensive injuries he had sustained. He had suffered fractures to his pelvis, femur, and ribs, injuries that would leave him in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. The physical scars were evident, but the emotional and psychological toll was profound. In the aftermath of the incident, SeaWorld faced intense scrutiny. The attack was attributed to a mistake in cueing during the performance, with Orky 2 inadvertently landing on John and Corky. However, many questioned the safety protocols in place, and the decision to allow trainers to perform such routines with large, powerful animals. The incident led to a reevaluation of safety measures, with SeaWorld implementing stricter guidelines for trainer-animal interactions. John's life was irrevocably changed. He retired from his position as a marine mammal trainer, dedicating himself to advocacy for ethical treatment of marine animals and the importance of safety in marine parks. His story became a cautionary tale, highlighting the inherent risks of working with wild animals in captivity and the need for constant vigilance and respect for their power and unpredictability. The incident also sparked a broader conversation about the ethics of keeping marine mammals in captivity. Animal rights activists used the attack as evidence of the dangers posed to both trainers and animals in such environments. The debate intensified, leading to increased public awareness and calls for reform in the treatment of marine life. In the years that followed, SeaWorld faced additional incidents involving orcas and trainers, further fueling the debate over the ethics of captivity. The company eventually announced the end of its orca breeding program and the cessation of theatrical orca shows, marking a significant shift in its approach to marine mammal entertainment. Marine parks often present a captivating image of thrilling performances with magnificent animals, but behind the scenes, the reality can be starkly different. Working with powerful creatures like orcas comes with risks that can lead to devastating consequences. For Kelty Byrne, a trainer at Sealand, the joy of working with these incredible animals would soon become overshadowed by tragedy. Sealand of the Pacific, located in Canada, was known for its exciting displays featuring orcas, sea lions, and dolphins. Each day, the trainers and animals captivated audiences, creating a facade that masked the often harsh realities of captivity. Among the orcas was Tilikum, a killer whale with a troubled past that raised significant ethical concerns about keeping such intelligent creatures confined. Tilikum was captured off the coast of Iceland at just 2 years old, torn from his pod, and thrust into a life of confinement. His first year in captivity was particularly difficult, filled with isolation and stress. When he arrived at Sealand in 1984, he shared a tank with 2 older female orcas, Ha-1 and Nutka-4. The close quarters led to a harsh social hierarchy, and Tilikum often found himself the target of bullying, resulting in significant physical and mental strain. Despite his troubled past, Tilikum had a strong bond with his trainers, particularly Eric Walters, a biologist who recognized the need for compassionate care. However, the demands of entertainment often overshadowed the animal's welfare. In an effort to manage the aggressive dynamics among the orcas, Sealand hired a new head trainer named Bruce Stevens from SeaWorld. He warned the trainers that if they didn't keep the orcas engaged, the animals might resort to dangerous behavior to entertain themselves. But as we know about human nature, many ignored this warning or failed to act until the situation grew dire. They believed they had more time, unaware that the tensions among the orcas were escalating. Eric, among those trainers, grew increasingly concerned as he noticed Tilikum and the other orcas becoming restless. He believed that the environment at Sealand was like a fast food restaurant, where the focus was on quick entertainment rather than the well-being of the animals. Tilikum, a highly intelligent creature, deserved more than a life filled with repetitive routines. As boredom and frustration set in among the orcas, they began to display increasingly aggressive behaviors. This change in demeanor made any interaction with humans more dangerous. By May 1989, Eric decided to leave Sealand. He felt that the situation was becoming untenable and feared that someone would eventually get hurt. Tragically, his warning would come true on February 20th, 1991, when an ordinary day at the park transformed into a nightmare. While visitors enjoyed the attractions, Kelty, a passionate 20-year-old trainer, prepared for her shift. She loved her work with the orcas, especially Tilikum. The morning started like any other. Trainers fed the orcas and moved through their usual routines. Kelty felt a spark of excitement as she stepped into the training area, her pulse quickening at the thought of working with Tilikum. But something felt different. The orcas were unusually restless, splashing and vocalizing louder than usual. Kelty noticed Tilikum circling the tank with a powerful energy that hinted at his frustration. She felt a twinge of unease but set it aside, focusing on the day's schedule. As the trainers went through their morning drills, Kelty worked closely with Tilikum, trying to engage him with toys and signals. The other trainers exchanged worried glances, but the routine continued. Kelty felt a thrill every time she interacted with Tilikum, oblivious to the growing tension. She believed she could manage the situation, confident in her bond with the orca. The moment of crisis came unexpectedly. After finishing her training session, Kelty slipped and fell into Tilikum's tank. In a split second, Tilikum seized her foot, dragging her beneath the surface. Panic erupted as her fellow trainers rushed to help. The sight of Kelty in Tilikum's grasp was horrifying. She was caught by a 22.5-foot long, 12,500-pound giant with strength that made escape impossible. Still, she fought fiercely, gasping for breath each time she surfaced, only to be pulled back under by the powerful orca. Chaos erupted as trainers threw life rings into the tank, desperately trying to save Kelty. They banged on buckets and tossed fish to distract the orcas, but Tilikum's grip remained unyielding. In a terrifying moment, Kelty surfaced, caught in Tilikum's jaws, screaming for help. Then, just as quickly, she vanished beneath the water's surface, silence replacing her cries. Despite her drowning, it took the trainers another 2 hours to persuade the orcas to release her. By that time, Tilikum and the other whales had bitten and stripped her multiple times, showcasing the power and unpredictability of these magnificent creatures. Retrieving her body took nearly 2 hours, during which Tilikum and the other whales continued to bite and drag her, a stark demonstration of their immense power. Tilikum, being the largest orca in captivity, made Kelty's struggle even more perilous. Sealand's management quickly labeled the incident a tragic accident. However, many, including Paul Spong, director of Orca Lab, believed it was predictable, stemming from the harsh conditions the orcas endured. In the wake of the tragedy, Sealand closed its doors, but Tilikum's story continued when he was transferred to SeaWorld in Orlando. There, trainers claimed to be unaware of his troubled history, overlooking the warning signs that had accompanied his past. This oversight would lead to further tragedy. In July 1999, Daniel Dukes, a man who had evaded security to spend the night in the park, was found dead in Tilikum's tank, his body showing signs of trauma. Despite the incidents, Tilikum was featured in performances at SeaWorld. The horrors continued when on February 24, 2010, during a show, trainer Don Brancheau was attacked by Tilikum. He seized her ponytail and pulled her into the water, shaking violently despite the frantic attempts of fellow trainers to rescue her. Tragically, she drowned before help could arrive. The incident was labeled a training accident, but many believe Tilikum's actions were deliberate. Over the course of his life, he had been linked to 3 deaths, but continued to perform until he succumbed to bacterial infection in 2017 at the age of 35. Following Don Brancheau's death, SeaWorld faced intense scrutiny and a sharp decline in attendance. Although the park remained open, it pledged to shift its focus toward education and conservation, ending its breeding program for orcas. While Kelty's story highlighted the tragic consequences of captivity, trainers faced challenges long before their lives became centered around performances. The experience of trainers like Kelty are just one chapter in a disturbing history of exploitation. In the next story, we focus on Ken Peters, a young trainer whose career was shattered by blind trust in a powerful creature, an unsettling reminder that no matter how familiar we become, the wild can never be fully tamed. On the morning of August 4, 2014, Ocean View Marine World in Tampa, Florida was already buzzing with activity. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the park's signature blue tanks. Maintenance crews worked quietly around the grounds as trainers prepped for another busy day. The air was heavy with the scent of salt water, and the rhythmic splash of waves in the pools set a calm but deceptive tone. It was a typical summer day, or at least it seemed that way. At 10 a.m., senior trainer David Mitchell prepared for a routine relationship session with Thor, the park's largest orca. At 31, David had spent 8 years working with marine mammals, rising through the ranks to become one of Ocean View's most trusted trainers. Known for his calm, methodical approach and his unwavering focus on safety, David had earned the respect of his peers and the animals he trained. Thor, a 21-foot, 9,000-pound male orca, was the park's main attraction. Captured near Iceland in 1992, he had been at Ocean View for decades. Although impressive and generally reliable, Thor had a history that made him unpredictable. He had been involved in 2 previous incidents, both the result of trainers breaching safety protocols. Thor's first recorded incident occurred in 2006 when a trainer was pulled into the water, resulting in a 3-month suspension of in-water interactions. The second incident occurred in 2012 when Thor refused to release a training object and aggressively rammed the tank wall during a high-energy session. No trainers were injured, but the event led to temporary changes in Thor's exercise routines. In response, the park implemented stricter rules, requiring at least 3 experienced trainers for every orca session and mandatory emergency drills to prepare for worst-case scenarios. That morning, David was joined by 2 newer trainers, Amy Rodriguez and Keith Parker. Both had recently completed their basic training but were still months away from being cleared for water work. Their job was to maintain safety positions around the tank while observing and assisting David from the dry side of the pool. The session began smoothly with Thor responding to David's bridge signals, short blasts from a whistle that told the orca he had completed a behavior correctly. At 10:45 a.m., everything changed. As David guided Thor through a set of basic relationship behaviors, Keith made a critical mistake. He left his designated position near the emergency signal podium to get a closer look at David's hand signals. The move seemed minor, but it created a secondary point of focus for Thor. The orca's eyes shifted between David and Keith, a known precursor to incidents documented in marine parks worldwide. David noticed the shift immediately and began backing away while maintaining his bridge signal, a standard response to defuse the situation. But then Amy made the second fatal error. Seeing David step back, she left her post as well, moving toward the edge of the tank. Suddenly, Thor had multiple moving targets. His behavior changed instantly. His previous smooth movements grew erratic, his dorsal fin cutting sharp angles through the water. Without warning, Thor surged forward. His massive head burst from the water with terrifying speed, and before David could react, the orca's jaws clamped around his torso. The force of the bite shattered ribs and pulled David into the pool. Chaos erupted. Amy panicked and pressed the wrong button on the signal podium, triggering the park's show-ending music instead of the emergency siren. Thor, conditioned to associate that sound with positive reinforcement, grew even more agitated. Keith abandoned his post entirely, running toward the pool with a bucket of fish, a move strictly forbidden in emergency protocols. The proper emergency response team, stationed 4 minutes away at the park's central first aid station, wasn't alerted until a maintenance worker noticed the commotion and triggered the correct alarm. During those critical first moments, Thor dragged David to the bottom of the 40-foot pool, holding him underwater for 30 to 45 seconds at a time. Senior trainer Lisa Hammond arrived 90 seconds into the incident and immediately saw the chaos. Amy was frantically cycling through incorrect signals while Keith waved the bucket at Thor. The underwater tone box, the device that should have been activated to recall Thor to the medical pool, sat untouched at Keith's abandoned station. Lisa shouted for Amy and Keith to clear the area, but Thor was beyond control. Each time David surfaced, gasping for air, Thor would pull him back down with increasing force. The orca slammed him into the tank walls, his thrashing growing more violent with each passing second. The rapid response team arrived at the 4-minute mark, but by then, David had been submerged multiple times. When Thor finally released him, his body floated near the medical pool, unresponsive. Paramedics rushed David to Tampa General Hospital, but the damage was too severe. The initial bite had crushed his rib cage, causing internal bleeding, but it was the prolonged submersion that proved fatal. Despite resuscitation efforts, David was pronounced dead at 11:27 a.m. Later, autopsy results showed that the initial bite shattered 5 ribs and punctured his left lung, while drowning was listed as the official cause of death due to prolonged submersion. The investigation that followed uncovered a series of troubling oversights. While Ocean View had updated its emergency protocols after a high-profile incident at another marine park in 2010, those protocols hadn't been properly enforced. Security footage revealed that neither Amy nor Keith had ever participated in a full emergency simulation, a clear violation of federal regulations requiring monthly drills for all Orca facility staff. OSHA's report highlighted multiple failures. The emergency signal podium wasn't clearly marked with protocol steps, unlike other major facilities that use color-coded buttons and written instructions. The underwater tone box hadn't been tested in over 3 weeks, violating industry standards that required weekly equipment checks. Most damning of all, the park had allowed the session to proceed with only one fully qualified trainer present. Thor was immediately suspended from performances. Within months, he was transferred to a marine facility in Spain with stricter protocols and more experienced staff. He never performed with trainers in the water again. Ocean View Marine World faced severe consequences. OSHA issued $2.5 million in fines for safety violations, the largest penalty ever levied against a marine park. Attendance plummeted as footage of the incident spread online, and within 2 years, the park closed its doors permanently. David Mitchell's death led to sweeping changes across the industry. New regulations required quarterly third-party audits of emergency procedures, mandatory videotaped drills, and annual certification for all staff working near orca pools. His story became required study material in marine mammal training courses, a stark lesson on how even the smallest mistakes can have catastrophic consequences. When working with the ocean's apex predators, no amount of experience can fully mitigate the risks. Their sheer power and unpredictability can turn even the most routine interaction into a life-or-death struggle. In those brief, chaotic moments, a single misstep or overlooked signal can set off a chain of events from which there is no turning back. The crowd at SeaWorld Orlando leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on Dawn Brancheau as she prepared to interact with Tilikum, the massive orca she'd trained for years. Everything seemed in place: the sunlit water, Dawn's confident smile, the rhythmic rise of Tilikum's dorsal fin as he swam nearby. But just beneath that calm surface, an unpredictable force lay waiting. And as Dawn signaled to Tilikum, no one in the crowd could have guessed that they were seconds away from witnessing a tragedy that would forever alter the world of marine shows. Dawn Brancheau had dreamed of working with orcas ever since she was 10. A family trip to SeaWorld had changed her life, igniting a passion for these immense, graceful creatures. Her journey from that wide-eyed little girl to one of SeaWorld's star trainers spanned years of dedication, education, and sheer hard work. Now, as a leading figure in SeaWorld's Shamu show, she'd become a face of the park, respected for her skill and the close bond she had with the orcas. For more than 16 years, Dawn had been a beloved trainer, her performances drawing massive crowds, each captivated by her seeming harmony with some of the ocean's most formidable animals. But among the orcas, Tilikum was different. Standing over 22 feet long and weighing nearly 12,000 pounds, he was the largest orca in captivity. His history was dark, marred by troubling incidents, yet he had spent years with SeaWorld, part of their most popular shows. With a history stretching back to the icy waters off Iceland, Tilikum had been captured as a 2-year-old and transported into a world confined by walls and schedules. Though his size made him impressive to watch, it also brought challenges, as he struggled with limited space and social isolation from other orcas. Despite his reputation, Don had worked closely with him for years, building a careful routine and familiarity that made their bond appear seamless to onlookers. It was February 24, 2010, during SeaWorld's popular Dine with Shamu event. Dawn lay flat on her stomach by the tank's edge, signaling Tilikum to approach. It was a routine she'd practiced hundreds of times, her long ponytail trailing down, a signal he recognized well. To the audience, it was another thrilling moment, a breathtaking glimpse into the connection between human and creature. But in a sudden, chilling twist, the familiar turned deadly. Without warning, Tilikum grabbed Dawn's ponytail in his jaws and yanked her into the water. A gasp spread through the audience, some assuming it was part of the show, others feeling a chill of unease. Trainers watching from nearby knew immediately something was wrong. Tilikum's grip was unyielding as he pulled Dawn deeper, his massive body moving with a raw power that was impossible to counter. Dawn fought with everything she had, her experience and strength no match for the orca's sheer force. As she struggled to surface, Tilikum slammed her against the walls of the tank, his actions relentless and terrifying. Every command and cue thrown his way went ignored, the signals he'd responded to countless times seeming to fall on deaf ears. Tilikum was beyond reach, lost to a primal instinct that had been held at bay for years. Each second became an agonizing eternity as Dawn tried to break free, only to be pulled back, tossed, and battered. The onlookers' shock turned to horror as the water grew red and cries began to fill the stadium. Trainers desperately worked to distract Tilikum, slapping the water and throwing emergency signals. But he wouldn't release his grip, locked in a terrifying fury. Dawn's injuries were catastrophic. In those brutal moments, her spine was severed, her ribs broken, and her left arm and scalp torn. Her body went limp, yet Tilikum continued to thrash her, his hold unyielding even as she was beyond help. It took over 30 minutes to finally retrieve her body. The horrified crowd, paralyzed by shock, began to realize they were witnessing one of the darkest moments in SeaWorld's history. A moment that would forever alter the world of marine animal entertainment. As Dawn's lifeless body was finally retrieved from the tank, a stunned silence spread through the stadium, interrupted only by quiet sobs from witnesses and murmurs from onlookers. Trainers, many who had known Dawn for years, stood shaken, grieving the loss of a beloved colleague. In the hours that followed, SeaWorld staff moved swiftly to close the park, guiding guests out and setting up barriers around the area. Emergency responders arrived, and officials from the Occupational Safety and Health Administration launched an investigation, beginning a deeper scrutiny that would shake the marine park industry. The public reacted immediately. News outlets worldwide reported on Dawn's tragic end, and as details emerged, the pattern of incidents became undeniable. Tilikum had been involved in 2 prior fatalities. In 1991, a young trainer at Sealand of the Pacific died in a similar incident, and later in 1999, a man who had entered Tilikum's tank after hours was found dead, his body battered by the Orca. These previous events, previously downplayed, now resurfaced under a critical lens as the public demanded answers. SeaWorld temporarily halted its Orca shows, initiating internal reviews and adding stricter protocols to prevent further tragedies. Dawn's death cast a long shadow over SeaWorld, leaving an urgent question: could trainers truly be safe with these powerful creatures? Not long after, trainer Steve Abel would confront that question firsthand when his trusted Orca suddenly turned on him mid-performance. In 1965, the world of marine entertainment took a dark turn when Ted Griffin, the owner of the Seattle Marine Aquarium, captured a wild killer whale. This act marked the beginning of a troubling relationship between humans and these magnificent creatures. The crowds flocked to see the spectacle, their excitement palpable as they marveled at the orca's power and grace. However, behind the scenes, a chilling reality unfolded. Within a year, the whale succumbed to the immense stress of captivity, a haunting reminder of the cost of entertainment. Griffin, undeterred by the tragedy, recognized a lucrative opportunity. He transformed the act of capturing orcas into a thriving business model, one that would cast a long shadow over the industry for decades. The methods of capturing these majestic creatures were harrowing. Explosives separated young orcas from their families, creating chaos in the water. Griffin's crew plunged into the turmoil, using massive nets to drag the terrified animals hundreds of miles to shore. The haunting cries of the family members left behind echoed through the ocean, a heart-wrenching testament to the pain inflicted by these captures. But the true tragedy was just beginning. Killer whales are highly intelligent and social animals. In the wild, they form tight-knit family groups, often remaining with their mothers for life. Their deep bonds and complex communication reflect an emotional capacity that few can fathom. Yet, the consequences of captivity began to reveal a darker side to their nature. In 1978, an orca named Kasatka was captured off the coast of Iceland, a young star who dazzled audiences at SeaWorld. However, as the years passed, captivity wore down her spirit. Early signs of aggression emerged, a predictable response from an animal torn from her family and thrust into confinement. As time went on, the tragic stories of orcas in captivity multiplied. Reports surfaced detailing the inhumane conditions these majestic creatures endured. Trainers like Ken Peters, who worked closely with Kasatka, began to notice the toll it was taking on them both. Ken had dedicated his life to training orcas, viewing them as partners in performance. Yet he could no longer ignore the growing risk. Kasatka had bitten him twice, once in 1993 and again in 1999. Each time, he dismissed it as a moment of misunderstanding, a miscommunication between species. Their bond felt profound, and he often marveled at the intelligence of these animals, believing that their connection could overcome the risks. Then came November 30th, 2006, a day that would shatter that illusion. As Ken dove into the water for a routine performance, the anticipation in the audience filled the air. They had come to see a show, but what unfolded was a nightmare. As Ken waited for Kasatka's familiar nudge, he felt a sudden jolt that yanked him beneath the surface. Panic surged through the crowd as they realized something was terribly wrong. Staff members rushed to the edge of the pool, shouting commands, but Kasatka was relentless, dragging Ken deeper into the murky water. Beneath the surface, Ken fought to stay calm, but fear gripped him as he struggled against the powerful orca. He could feel the pressure building in his ears, the weight of the water pressing down on him. Kasatka's grip tightened, her teeth sinking into his foot. Time slowed as Ken's mind raced. This was a moment he had long dreaded. Would this be the end? Instinctively, he reached out, stroking her gently, trying to connect with her. He knew he was at her mercy, and if she turned on him, it would be over in an instant. Then, as if sensing his desperation, Kasatka began to swim toward the surface. Ken gasped for air as she released him slightly, but still held him tightly. The crowd erupted into chaos. He realized he had to fight for his life. As they broke the surface, he heard frantic calls from staff members above, desperately trying to coax Kasatka away. He struggled, summoning every ounce of strength he had to escape her grip. Each moment felt like an eternity. Finally, the staff lowered a net into the water. Ken swam with all his might, panic surging through him. As Kasatka surfaced again, he whispered her name, hoping to reach her with the bond they had built. Miraculously, she responded, swimming toward the net. Seizing the moment, Ken propelled himself toward the edge of the pool, scrambling out onto the concrete, his heart racing. Emerging battered with puncture wounds and a broken foot, Ken's survival felt like a small miracle amid the chaos. The aftermath sent shockwaves through SeaWorld and ignited fierce debates about the ethics of keeping orcas in captivity. Why hadn't anyone seen this coming? Was the industry prepared to confront the consequences of their actions? Kasatka's story didn't end with the attack. She passed away on August 15, 2017 at the age of 41 due to a persistent lung infection attributed to her years in captivity. At her death, she was the oldest orca in captivity, a bittersweet title that highlighted the scars left by a life spent in confinement. Following her passing, SeaWorld pledged to change its approach to orca care, promising to prioritize their well-being over entertainment. Steve Abel was a veteran SeaWorld trainer known to thousands of visitors at the San Antonio park. Over nearly 2 decades, he formed an impressive bond with the massive orca Kai, captivating audiences with their synchronized movements and trust-filled routines. But on a summer day in 2004, this trust would face its greatest test. A day that started as a routine performance took a sudden and terrifying turn. On July 27th, with the sun rising high over San Antonio, SeaWorld Stadium filled with eager spectators for the Shamu Adventure Show. At the center of this spectacle were Steve and Kai, a 9,000-pound orca stretching 22 feet in length. The routine was carefully crafted over years of training, perfected in countless rehearsals. Steve, with 17 years of experience, knew Kai's every move and had fostered a strong connection with him. Today seemed like any other show, until it wasn't. Steve had long been admired by fans and colleagues alike, known for his calm demeanor and near instinctive understanding of marine animals. Kai, in turn, had become a fixture in these performances, often mesmerizing the crowd with his athletic displays. Despite the grandeur, the risks were always present, lurking just beneath the surface. Kai, a fully grown orca, possessed an immense untamed strength, and while years of training allowed Steve to develop a rapport with the animal, he understood the delicate line he walked with each show. Would today be the day that line was crossed? As the performance began, Steve entered the tank, moving in sync with Kai. The orca executed flips and spins with ease, eliciting cheers from the audience. Every maneuver seemed routine, every interaction calculated. But then, with no apparent provocation, Kai's behavior changed. Steve gave a command, but instead of complying, Kai paused. Steve tried to redirect him with a familiar signal, but the orca's gaze had turned unreadable, his movements suddenly unpredictable. Suddenly, Kai's demeanor shifted. With a swift, unrestrained surge, he charged at Steve, sending waves crashing against the sides of the tank. The impact hit like a tidal wave, and Steve, momentarily stunned, struggled to regain his balance. For a brief, harrowing moment, the audience thought this might be part of the performance, but the intensity of Kai's movements told a different story. The orca's strikes grew more forceful, his powerful body slamming into Steve, who fought to stay above the waterline. Kai seized Steve, holding him underwater. In an instant, the orca launched him upward, only to slam him back down, each motion displaying Kai's immense strength. Steve's training instincts engaged as he struggled to stay calm, his muscles straining to keep his head above water. The orca's 9,000-pound frame turned into a powerful force, tossing Steve around as if he weighed nothing. At the pool's edge, fellow trainers sprang into action, slapping the water and throwing fish in desperate attempts to draw Kai's attention. The atmosphere buzzed with tension as they frantically signaled, trying every emergency tactic to reach him. Yet, Kai, later described as overstimulated, remained beyond their cues, his focus locked solely on Steve. Would any of their efforts break through the powerful orca's single-minded intensity? With a surge of adrenaline, Steve managed to free himself briefly, only for Kai to rush at him again, dragging him to the tank's depths. Each brutal slam echoed underwater, leaving Steve battered and breathless. The audience, horrified, sat in stunned silence, many covering their eyes, unable to bear what felt like Steve's final moments. But through sheer will, Steve held on, using his years of experience to stay still whenever Kai let go, avoiding movements that might trigger another attack. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Kai's aggression eased. As Steve pulled himself from the tank, the silence was broken by scattered gasps and murmurs from the stunned audience. Trainers rushed to his side, steadying him as he caught his breath, his body bearing the visible marks of the ordeal. The reality of what had just unfolded set in, and SeaWorld staff quickly ushered the crowd away, keenly aware of the gravity of the incident. In the aftermath of Steve's encounter with Kai, SeaWorld took immediate steps to reevaluate its protocols and policies. Close contact interactions with Kai were permanently suspended, and the incident added fuel to the growing debate over orca captivity. Yet, while Steve's brush with danger left him shaken, other orcas had endured far darker fates in captivity. Among the most haunting of these stories was that of Hugo, a performing orca who, after years of self-destructive behaviors and deteriorating health, chose a path that left the world stunned. His tragic end would reveal a harsh reality about life in captivity and the toll it takes on even the strongest of spirits. Thank you for watching this video on the most horrific orca attacks ever recorded. If you're curious for more, check out the video recommended on your end screen right now. See you there!